Can you even shoot?" My brother-in-law Randy said it loud enough for half the backyard to hear. He stood behind the grill with one hand wrapped around a Bud Light smoke rolling up around his face, while burger grease popped against his bright blue Hawaiian shirt. "Let me guess," he said, grinning at his buddies. "Office job." A couple people laughed politely. I folded my paper napkin and set it beside my untouched potato salad. "I flew strike missions," I said. Randy barked out a laugh so hard he nearly spilled his beer. "Okay, now that's good." The 4th of July party had been going for maybe 2 hours and he'd already worked through most of the cooler. That meant he was entering the dangerous phase. Loud, sloppy, mean. "What was your call sign then?" he asked. I should have ignored him. Looking back, that would have been the smart move. But my hip was throbbing from standing too long, sweat kept running down my back in the Florida heat, and I was tired. Tired in that deep way that settles into your bones after enough years pretending things don't bother you. So I answered, "Ghost Mama." The words barely left my mouth before somebody pushed back a chair hard enough to scrape across the concrete patio. An older man near the porch stood up slowly. Gray beard, navy tattoo faded almost blue-green on his forearm, maybe late 60s. His face had gone pale. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. The backyard got quiet. Not completely quiet. Somewhere behind us, kids were still screaming through a sprinkler. Leonard Skynerd was still crackling through a Bluetooth speaker beside the pool. But around our table, the air changed. The older man stared at me like he'd seen a ghost himself. "I know who she is." Randy blinked at him, confused. "You serious?" The man ignored him. "You flew Kandahar," he said softly to me. I felt my stomach tighten. "My name's Earl Banning," he said. "SEAL Team 5. I nodded once. That was enough. Earl looked down for a second and shook his head slowly like he was remembering something ugly. "You stayed in the air 23 extra minutes," he said quietly. "People still talk about that." Nobody at the table said a word. My younger sister, Jenna, looked back and forth between us with that worried expression she'd worn most of her marriage. Randy laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. "Okay, hold on. What is this, some kind of military secret club thing?" Earl looked at him the way older men sometimes look at reckless younger ones. Not angry, worse than angry. Disappointed. "You ought to be careful who you mock," he said. Randy straightened up immediately. I was joking around. Earl grabbed his paper plate and walked back toward the porch. That should have ended it. Instead, Randy got embarrassed. And embarrassed men are dangerous creatures, especially the kind who think every room belongs to them. "Well," he said loudly after a few seconds, forcing another laugh, "guess we got ourselves female Rambo over here." A few nervous chuckles scattered around the yard. I stood up slowly. My right hip caught halfway upright like it always did when I sat too long. Felt like rusty metal grinding together. One of the screws from my surgery still shifted during bad weather, too. Doctors said that could happen. I grabbed my keys from the patio table. Jenna immediately followed me with her eyes. "Claire, you leaving already?" "Yeah, you just got here." I smiled at her because none of this was her fault. "I'm tired, Jen." Randy lifted his beer. "Don't fly any fighter jets on the way home." That one got a bigger laugh from his friends. I looked at him for a second, really looked at him. 46 years old. Sunburned neck. Beer gut pressing against his belt. That loud confidence men get when life starts slipping away from them and they're trying to outrun the feeling. Then I looked at my nephews sitting near the pool. Both boys were watching their father carefully before laughing. That part hurt worse than Randy, because kids learn what earns approval. And what gets ignored. I squeezed Jenna's shoulder on my way past. "You call me later," I said quietly. She nodded, though she already looked exhausted. I made it to my truck before the tightness in my chest finally loosened enough to breathe. My old black Tacoma still smelled faintly like wet dog and motor oil. Diesel, my Labrador, had ridden with me everywhere for almost 12 years before cancer took him last winter. Sometimes I still caught myself looking in the rearview mirror expecting to see him back there. I sat for a minute without starting the engine. Fireworks cracked somewhere across the bay. My hip pulsed hard enough to make my lower back ache. I rubbed the scar through my jeans. Funny thing about getting older after the military. People assume the hardest part was combat. It wasn't. The hardest part was becoming ordinary again after spending years surviving things most people never even imagined. Nobody sees the aftermath part. The surgeries. The insomnia. The weight gain after your body starts breaking down. The silence. Especially for women. A man with gray hair and a limp gets called distinguished. A woman gets called tired. I started the truck and pulled away from the curb while Randy's laughter still floated faintly across the neighborhood. Halfway down the street, my phone buzzed in the cup holder. Text from Jenna. I'm sorry. I stared at it at a red light outside Gulf Breeze Parkway. Then another message came through. He drinks too much when he's stressed. Please don't hate him. That one sat in my chest a while. Because I didn't hate Randy. I understood him. That was the problem. I drove north with the windows cracked, humid Gulf air moving through the cab while an old Alan Jackson song played softly through the radio. By the time I reached my little place near the water outside Pensacola, my hands hurt from gripping the steering wheel too hard. The porch light clicked on automatically when I pulled in. For a second, I just sat there listening to the engine tick. Then I whispered something I hadn't said out loud in years. Not again. The next morning, I woke up with my phone face down on the nightstand and a headache sitting right behind my eyes. Not a drinking headache. I hadn't touched a drop at Randy's barbecue. Mine was the kind you get from sleeping tense, jaw-clenched dreams running hot all night. I made coffee in the same chipped navy mug I'd had since 2007 and stood barefoot in my kitchen while the sun came up over the little strip of water behind my house. Pensacola mornings can fool you. They look peaceful before the heat gets mean. Pink sky, flat water, pelicans dragging their bellies low over the bay. Then by 10 o'clock the humidity wraps around your neck like a wet towel. I had 2 physical therapy stretches to do before breakfast. The hip hated both of them. By 8 I was at the simulator building near the base, walking 3 young pilots through emergency procedures. They were polite kids, smart, too young to know how young they were. One of them called me ma'am with that careful tone people use when they're trying to be respectful, but also wondering what happened to you. I didn't hold it against him. At lunch I checked Facebook. That was my mistake. Randy had posted a picture from the barbecue, me sitting at the patio table looking tired holding a plastic fork. He'd zoomed in just enough to make it ugly. Caption said, "Family BBQ with America's most classified office warrior." Under it, one of his buddies had written, G.I. Jane Costco edition. I stared at that line longer than I should have. Then I put the phone down, closed my eyes, and counted backward from 20. That's something a therapist taught me at the VA, count backward. Name 5 things you can see. Feel your feet on the floor. Remind your body you're not back there. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. That afternoon, Jenna called while I was driving home past a strip mall with a Winn-Dixie, a vape shop, and one of those tax places that stays open all year somehow. Did you see it? She asked. Yes. I told him to take it down. He didn't. No. Her voice got small. He said everybody's too sensitive now. I watched an old man in a straw hat push a cart full of bottled water across the parking lot. Jen, I said, is he okay? She gave this dry little laugh. Not amused, just worn out. No. But if I say that out loud, then I have to do something about it. That sentence told me more than she meant it to. Randy's construction business had been limping along for almost a year. Custom decks, kitchen remodels, storm repairs after bad weather. He used to do well enough to brag about it. Then younger contractors came in with better websites, cleaner trucks, drone footage, online reviews. Randy hated all of them. He especially hated one named Tyler who drove a new Ford F250 and wore clean boots. He says people don't respect real men anymore, Jenna said. I almost laughed, but not because it was funny. Men like Randy always used that phrase when what they meant was people stopped automatically obeying me. He drinking more, I asked. Silence. Then some. That meant yes. A few days later, Earl Banning showed up at my house holding a paper sack from a gas station and 2 coffees. I saw him through the screen door and almost pretended not to be home. But he'd already seen me. Brought pie, he said. What kind? Peach. Well, that's unfair. He smiled. I let him in. Earl moved like old military men do when their knees are bad, but their pride is worse. Slow, careful pretending it doesn't hurt. We sat at my kitchen table under a ceiling fan that made a soft clicking sound every 3rd rotation. For a while we talked about nothing. Weather, VA appointments, bad coffee, the Blue Angels practicing loud enough to rattle windows. Then he looked at me. You don't talk about Kandahar. Number. Fair enough. I picked at the edge of the paper plate. He took a bite of pie, chewed, swallowed. Still, he said I'd been alive 15 extra years because of what you did. My hand tightened around the coffee cup. Earl, I'm not trying to drag you backward. Feels like it? He nodded once. I know. That surprised me. Most people, when they want your pain, pretend they're honoring you. Earl didn't. He just sat there like a man who knew exactly what kind of door he was standing near and didn't plan to kick it open. Finally, he said, "That brother-in-law of yours, he's got something ugly brewing. He's loud." "No," Earl said. "Loud is one thing, humiliated is another." I looked toward the window. Outside, my neighbor's sprinkler ticked across a patch of half-burned grass. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked twice and quit. "He's Jenna's husband," I said. "Doesn't make him safe." I didn't answer, because I already knew that. Over the next 2 weeks, Randy became a full-time fool with part-time internet access. He bought tactical gloves and posted mirror pictures in his garage, ordered some kind of black vest online and wore it while mowing the yard, told one of his friends he was special operations adjacent, which was such a stupid phrase I actually laughed when Jenna repeated it. Then he got drunk one Saturday and tried to show the boys how a taser worked. He shocked the metal leg of a patio chair, screamed, dropped it, and kicked over a cooler. That should have been the joke everyone remembered. Instead, he kept using me. Anytime he needed a laugh, there I was. Another post. Another comment. Another ugly little jab dressed up like humor. And here's the part I'm not proud of. I let it get to me. I told myself I didn't care. I'd survived worse men than Randy. Men with weapons, men with radios, men who didn't get embarrassed at backyard parties. But humiliation doesn't care what you survived. It finds the soft place anyway. One night around 2:30 in the morning, I got up because sleep wasn't happening. I walked into the spare bedroom where I kept old boxes, uniforms, flight logs, things I never looked at but couldn't throw away. My flight jacket was hanging in the back of the closet. Brown leather, cracked at the cuffs, name patch still there. Mercer. I pulled it out and pressed it to my face. It didn't really smell like jet fuel anymore. That was probably memory doing what memory does. But for a second I was younger, sharper, lighter. Before the surgeries. Before the wait. Before I had to sit on the edge of the bed some mornings and talk myself into standing up. Then my phone lit up on the dresser. Another notification. Randy had tagged me. I didn't open it right away. I already knew it would be cruel. And that was the thing that finally scared me. Not Randy. Me. Because for one clean second standing there in my old jacket with my hip burning and my eyes wet, I wanted to hurt him. Not embarrass him. Not correct him. Hurt him. I put the jacket back in the closet very carefully. Then I sat on the floor until morning. About 3 weeks after the barbecue, I got a phone call that turned my stomach cold before the man on the other end even finished introducing himself. "Commander Ellis," he said. Nobody from my old life ever called just to say hello. I was sitting in my truck outside a Publix with a gallon of milk melting in the passenger seat. Rain hammered the windshield hard enough to blur the parking lot into gray streaks. For a second, I considered pretending the connection was bad. Instead, I said, "Sir, you still in Pensacola?" "Unfortunately." That got a small laugh out of him. Then silence. I knew that silence. Military people pause before bad news. Civilians rush toward it. Military people circle it first. Finally, he said, "Defense Department approved partial declassification on Kandahar." Every muscle in my shoulders tightened. A woman pushing carts outside disappeared behind sheets of rain while I stared through the windshield. "What part?" I asked carefully. "The extraction." I closed my eyes. Not because I was proud. Because I was tired. "There's a documentary crew involved," he continued. "Limited release, Veterans Network. They want interviews." "Number." "You didn't even let me finish." "Yes, I did." "Claire." "No cameras." "Your name's already circulating again." That word hit me harder than the rest. Circulating. Like a virus. Like smoke. "Ghost mama." I leaned my forehead against the steering wheel. "You know what people remember?" I asked quietly. "The parts where everybody lived." Commander Ellis didn't answer. Because we both knew that wasn't true. Not everybody came home. I hung up a minute later and sat there listening to rain pound the roof of the Tacoma. Then against my better judgment, I remembered. Kandahar had smelled like heat and metal. People always imagine war smells like gunpowder. Mostly it smells like engines, sweat, burned wiring, dust baked into everything. That night started bad and got worse fast. I'd been flying support when the radios erupted all at once. Too many voices talking over each other. Somebody screaming coordinates. Somebody else yelling about incoming fire. Then one sentence cut through clean. "We got men trapped." You never forget the tone of that voice. Not fear exactly. Urgency. I remember pulling hard left over dark mountains while warning alarms flashed red across my cockpit. My aircraft had already taken damage from ground fire 20 minutes earlier. One engine running rough, fuel bleeding faster than it should have been. Command told me to pull back. I didn't. Simple as that. People always expect hero stories to feel dramatic while they're happening. Mostly they feel mechanical. Training takes over. You move because somebody has to. The trapped team included SEALs and Marines pinned during extraction. Helicopters trying to reach them were taking fire too heavy to land clean. So I stayed overhead, made another pass, then another. The radio chatter still visits me some nights. Young voices trying to sound calm. One pilot breathing too fast. A medic praying under his breath because he forgot his mic was still hot. Smoke had started leaking into my cockpit by then, thin gray ribbons around the instrument panel. I remember wiping sweat out of my eyes with my glove while alarms screamed continuously in my headset. At one point, command ordered me back again. I ignored them again. That part made people call me brave later. Truth was uglier. I couldn't leave those boys down there. Not while they still sounded alive. The extraction eventually worked. Barely. Helicopters got out. Most of the men got home. Then another aircraft went down, supporting the retreat afterward. I still knew their names. Still saw them sometimes in dreams. People hear stories like that and think surviving turns you into something stronger. Sometimes it just turns you into someone older than you were before. Rain cracked hard against my windshield and pulled me back into the Publix parking lot. My phone buzzed again almost immediately. Jenna! Hey, I answered. You busy? Number. She sounded nervous. Randy started some kind of veterans charity thing. I blinked. What? He says it's for mentorship and transition support. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because sometimes stupidity arrives so perfectly timed it almost feels scripted. He doesn't know anything about veterans. I know. Where'd this even come from? He said military organizations have money available if you know the right people. There it was. Money. Always money. Jenna hesitated. He's been using photos with you online. The cold feeling in my stomach deepened. What kind of photos? The barbecue. Some older family stuff. He made it sound like you're involved. I rubbed my eyes slowly. Jen, I told him not to. But, he says families support each other. That sentence sat between us quietly. Families support each other. Funny how people only say that when they want permission to behave badly. That evening I drove over to their house. Randy was in the garage drinking beer beside a riding mower with the hood open for no reason. Country music blasted from an old radio while mosquitoes swarmed the overhead light. He looked up and smirked immediately. Well, if it isn't Maverick, we need to talk. That usually means something fun. I shut the garage door behind me. His expression shifted slightly then. Not fear. Attention. I held out my phone showing his website. Veteran Mentorship Foundation. Pictures of American flags. Pictures of soldiers. Pictures of him standing beside me. You need to take this down, I said. Randy took another drink first. Why? Because you're implying military service. I'm supporting veterans. You're exploiting them. His jaw tightened. There's funding available for veteran-connected businesses. There it is. Oh, please, he snapped. Everybody uses connections. Not like this. He stood up too fast, beer sloshing onto the concrete. You think you're better than everybody, because you flew around in circles 20 years ago. I stayed quiet. That made him angrier. You walk in here acting superior while my business gets hammered every damn month. This isn't help, Randy. You know what your problem is, he barked. You military people never shut it off, especially women. I felt my pulse start climbing. Take the site down. Number, you still can. And what, he laughed harshly. You gonna bomb me? I turned toward the garage door. Then he said the thing that stopped me cold. Look at you. I froze. You think anybody sees some legendary pilot, he said. You're a tired woman with a limp living alone with a dead dog. That one landed clean. Sometimes cruel people get lucky. He stepped closer. Whole country moved on, Claire. You're the only one still pretending any of that mattered. For one dangerous second I almost hit him. Not a slap. Not a shove. Something uglier. I could feel it rising right out of old places inside me. Instead, I opened the garage door and walked out into the wet Florida heat before I did something I'd regret forever. Around midnight, I ended up parked under the fluorescent lights of a Buc-ee's off Interstate 10. Truckers moved through the store carrying giant sodas and barbecue sandwiches, while rainwater steamed off the asphalt outside. I sat in the truck eating a cold turkey sandwich I barely tasted. My eyes burned. My hip hurt, and for the first time in years I heard myself ask a question I'd kept buried a long time. What if surviving didn't actually make me strong? What if it just made me harder to live with? I stared out at the glowing gas pumps while 18-wheelers rumbled through the night. Then I whispered into the empty cab, "I'm so damn tired." The next morning I almost called Jenna and told her everything. Not about Kandahar. About Randy. About the look in his eyes inside that garage. Because I'd seen that look before, not in him specifically. In men cornered by shame. Men who felt life slipping away and needed somebody else to bleed for it. But Jenna already sounded tired every time she answered the phone. And tired people start protecting disasters because they don't have the energy to survive another collapse. So instead I drove to the VA clinic for my orthopedic appointment and pretended my life was normal. That's the funny thing about getting older. You can be falling apart emotionally while arguing with a receptionist about parking validation 5 minutes later. The waiting room smelled like burnt coffee and antiseptic. A television mounted in the corner played a cooking show nobody watched. Half the men in there wore veteran hats. Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraq. You could almost chart American history by the hats. An older Marine across from me noticed my limp when I stood to stretch. "Hip?" he asked. "Yeah." He nodded like that explained everything. Because sometimes it does. After the appointment, I sat in my truck staring at my phone for almost 20 minutes before finally calling Earl. "You busy?" I asked. Retired people are always busy pretending not to be retired. That got the first real laugh out of me in days. "I need help," I said quietly. Silence. Then Earl answered in the same calm tone he'd probably used under gunfire. "Okay. No questions first." "Just okay." That mattered more than I can explain. We met later that afternoon at a seafood place near the marina outside Gulf Shores. The kind with cracked vinyl booths, fried shrimp baskets, and old fishing photos yellowing on the walls. Rain clouds hung low over the water. Earl slid into the booth across from me carrying a folder. "I made a few calls," he said. I stared at the folder. "Already?" "You're not the only person Randy's been talking to." That made my stomach sink. Inside were printouts, screenshots, loan applications, website pages, social media posts. And there it was. Veteran-affiliated small business assistants. Randy hadn't technically claimed military service directly. He was smarter than that. But he'd wrapped himself around mine. Photos beside me. References to family military leadership. Mentions of combat-connected mentorship values. Just enough implication to fool people skimming applications. "Jesus," I muttered. "He's playing the edge," Earl said. "That's what grifters do." I hated that word immediately. Grifter. Because it made Randy sound simple. And he wasn't simple. He was unraveling. "There's a difference." A waitress refilled our iced teas while country music hummed softly overhead. "You could report him today," Earl said once she walked away. I looked out toward the marina. Several old boats rocked gently against the dock in the wind. Pelicans perched on wooden posts like tired old men waiting for something. "No," I said. Earl studied me carefully. "You still protecting your sister?" "Yes." "You can't save everybody, Claire." I almost smiled. "That's funny coming from a SEAL." He grunted quietly into his tea glass. "Fair point." For the next couple weeks I tried convincing myself the situation might still settle down on its own. Then Randy got worse. Way worse. The drinking stopped being social and started becoming structural. Morning beers, slurred Facebook videos, angry comments under local news articles about politics and weak men. Jenna called me crying one night because Randy punched a hole through their laundry room door after one of the boys dented his truck backing out of the driveway. "He didn't touch anybody," she said quickly. That sentence. Women say it like it's good news. I drove over immediately. By the time I got there, Randy was sitting shirtless in the backyard with a whiskey glass acting like nothing happened. The boys stayed upstairs. Jenna kept folding towels in the kitchen without looking at anybody. Randy smiled when he saw me. "There she is, America's favorite Air Force princess." "Navy," I said automatically. "What?" "I was Navy." "Whatever." I leaned against the counter, watching him carefully. He looked rough. Eyes bloodshot. Belly hanging heavier than before, skin flushed from alcohol and Florida heat. A man rotting slowly in public. "You need to stop this charity thing," I said. "There it is again," he snapped. "You military people think you own patriotism. This isn't patriotism. It's business. It's fraud." That word hit him hard. He stood up immediately. "You threatening me?" "Number. You recording me now too?" I blinked. "What?" Then I realized. Paranoia. The kind that grows once people know they're lying. Jenna froze at the kitchen sink. Randy pointed at me with shaking fingers. You think because some old war buddies know your nickname, you can destroy people. I kept my voice level. I'm trying not to. That made him angrier than yelling would have, because deep down Randy already knew I could ruin him if I wanted, and he hated needing anything from me. 3 nights later, Earl called around 11. You need to hear this before somebody else tells you. My stomach tightened instantly. What happened? Randy came down to Perdido Marina drunk. I sat upright in bed. And he recognized me. That's not good. Nope. Turns out Randy had been drinking at the Marina bar after some local contractor event. Earl was there with 2 other veterans watching a baseball game. Randy walked over already drunk and spoiling for a fight. At first he tried acting friendly, then he started talking louder. Then uglier. You old guys worship her like she's some damn war goddess, he'd said. Nobody answered, so he kept going. According to Earl, the whole bar got quiet when Randy leaned across the table and said, You know what her real problem is? She can't stand seeing regular men succeed. I rubbed my forehead hard while Earl talked. Did he threaten you? Indirectly. What does that mean? It means one of his buddies pulled him outside before he said something stupid enough for police paperwork. Wonderful. Somebody recorded part of it, Earl added. I closed my eyes. Of course they did. Small towns love 3 things: boat gossip, public meltdowns, and watching proud men collapse. The next morning, Randy announced his biggest idea yet. Veteran Mentorship Foundation Charity Banquet. Holiday Inn Ballroom outside Mobile. Sponsors, donors, local business owners. And somehow, unbelievably, he publicly announced me as guest of honor. I found out from Facebook. There was my photo beside an American flag graphic with bold gold letters. Special appearance retired combat aviator, Claire Ghost Mama Mercer. I stared at it while my coffee went cold. Then my phone rang. Jenna. Her voice was shaking. I didn't know he was doing this. I rubbed my jaw slowly. Jen. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize for him anymore. Silence. Then very quietly. I think I forgot that. That one broke my heart a little. That night Earl came over again. We sat outside listening to cicadas scream through the dark trees while Gulf air rolled off the water. You gonna go? He asked. I thought about Randy standing in that ballroom pretending to honor veterans while using my life like a business card. I thought about the boys upstairs hearing their father punch walls. I thought about all the years I stayed quiet because quiet felt safer. Then I looked at Earl. No, I said honestly, I really don't want to. He nodded. But I stared out at the black water beyond the dock. But I'm done hiding from people like him. The banquet was held in a Holiday Inn ballroom off the 65 just outside Mobile, the kind of place where every carpet pattern looks like it was chosen by a tired committee in 1998. I got there 20 minutes early and almost turned around in the parking lot. That's the truth. I sat in my Tacoma with both hands on the steering wheel, watching people walk through the automatic doors in church shirts and business polos. A few older men wore veteran caps. One woman had a gold star pin on her blazer. That pin made my chest tighten, because this wasn't just about Randy anymore. He had dragged real grief into the room. He had put a donation table beside a coffee urn and called it honor. My phone buzzed. Earl, you here? I typed back. Parking lot. His reply came quick. I'm inside, left side, blue shirt, don't let him own the room. I breathed out slowly. My hands were shaking. I hated that. I hated that after everything I'd flown through, one cheap ballroom and one loud man could still make my body act like danger was waiting behind the door. But bodies remember humiliation too. I stepped out of the truck. My hip caught as soon as I stood sharp and hot. I leaned against the door for half a second until it passed, then straightened my blouse, grabbed the folder from the passenger seat, and walked in. Inside the room smelled like burnt coffee carpet cleaner and those little chicken skewers hotels serve when they want to look fancy without spending money. There were folding chairs and rows round tables along the sides, and plastic patriotic centerpieces with tiny American flags stuck in blue foam. Randy had gone all out in the cheapest possible way. A banner hung behind the podium. Veteran Mentorship Foundation Service, Courage, Leadership. He had no right to any of those words. Jenna stood near the back wall wearing a navy dress I'd seen her wear to Easter service. She looked pale. The boys were with her, both uncomfortable in button-down shirts, pretending not to notice their father working the room like a county commissioner. Randy saw me and smiled too big. There she is, he called, crossing the room with both arms open. Our guest of honor. He tried to hug me. I stepped slightly aside and let his arms close on air. A few people noticed. His smile twitched. "You ready?" he asked through his teeth. "No," I said. He laughed like I'd made a joke. "Just say a few nice words. Family support, veterans matter, that kind of thing." I looked at him. "You still have time to cancel this." His eyes hardened. "There it is." "I'm serious." "So am I." He leaned closer. His breath smelled like peppermint and whiskey. "You embarrass me tonight, you embarrass your sister too." That almost worked. For 1 second I looked past him at Jenna. She was watching us with her hands clasped tight in front of her. Then she gave me the smallest nod. Not permission exactly. More like surrender. Like she finally understood the house was already burning. Randy walked to the podium at 7 o'clock sharp. He gave a speech. Lord, did he give a speech? He talked about sacrifice, about brotherhood, about the battlefield mindset. He said boots on the ground 3 different times, and not once did it make sense. He called military transition a warrior's corporate re-entry protocol, which made Earl lower his head like he was praying for patience. People clapped politely. Randy soaked it up. Then he lifted one hand toward me. "And now I want to introduce someone very special. My sister-in-law, retired combat aviator Claire Mercer. Some of you might know her by a little nickname." He paused for effect. "Ghost Mama." The room shifted. Several veterans looked up sharply. One older man near the aisle whispered something to his wife. Randy smiled wider, thinking he'd impressed them. He hadn't. I walked to the front with the folder against my chest. My legs felt heavy. When I reached the podium, Randy gave me this satisfied little look like he'd finally gotten me where he wanted me. The microphone was warm from his hand. I adjusted it down. For a moment, all I could hear was the air conditioning humming overhead. Then I looked at Jenna. Then the boys. Then Earl. "I wasn't planning to speak tonight," I said. My voice came out steadier than my hands. "I was invited here as a symbol, not as a person. That happens more often than folks think." A few people shifted in their chairs. Randy's smile began fading. "I served in the Navy. I flew missions I don't talk about much. Not because I'm ashamed, because some memories don't belong on display tables next to donation envelopes." The room went very still. Randy stepped half a foot toward me. I opened the folder. "This foundation has been represented to local donors and business programs as Veteran Connected. It has used my image, my service record, and implied endorsements without my consent." Randy said loudly, "Claire, this is not the time." I didn't look at him. On the projector screen behind me, Earl's friend had already loaded the files through a hotel laptop. That had been the one part I thought might fail. It didn't. The first image appeared. Randy's website. Then the loan language. Then the manipulated posts. Then screenshots of him mocking actual veterans online while asking other people for money in their name. A murmur moved through the room. Not loud. Worse. Controlled. The kind that means people are doing math in their heads. Randy lunged toward the laptop, but Earl stood up. Just stood. That was enough. Randy stopped. Earl's voice carried across the ballroom. "She covered men like me under enemy fire while you used her name to chase checks." A man in a Vietnam cap near the front muttered, not quite under his breath, "You asked her call sign. Biggest mistake you ever made." Somebody laughed once, sharp and mean. Then nobody laughed. Randy turned red from his neck to his forehead. "This is family business," he shouted. I finally looked at him. "No, you made it public?" He pointed at me, handshaking. "You vindictive." "Careful," Earl said. Randy's mouth snapped shut, but only for a second. "You ruined me," he yelled. That hit the room hard because everybody heard what he didn't say. He didn't say I lied. He didn't say those documents were fake. He said I ruined him. Jenna covered her mouth. One of the boys stared at the floor. The younger one looked like he might cry. That nearly broke me. I gripped the side of the podium until the edge pressed into my palm. "I gave you a chance," I said, and my voice cracked there. I hated that too, but maybe it needed to. "I asked you privately to stop. I tried to keep this inside the family. But I stayed quiet for family long enough." Randy's face twisted. "You think you're some hero?" "No," I said. "I think I'm done being useful to people who don't respect me." Security came in after that. 2 hotel employees and 1 off-duty deputy who'd been hired for the event. Randy shouted the whole way out. Called me bitter. Called Earl a liar. Called the donors cowards. Phones were up everywhere. Jenna didn't move until the doors shut behind him. Then she sat down like her knees had quit. I left the podium and went to her, but she didn't reach for me right away. For a second I thought I'd lost her. Then she grabbed my hand with both of hers and held on so hard it hurt. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I shook my head. "Don't." The room behind us buzzed with voices, chairs scraping, donors demanding answers. Earl handled most of that. He was better with controlled chaos than I was. I walked outside alone. The Alabama night was thick and warm. Traffic hissed along the interstate beyond the hotel lights. I thought I would feel relief, maybe satisfaction. Maybe that clean little movie ending rush people imagine when a bully finally gets exposed. Instead, I bent over beside my truck and tried not to throw up. 3 months after the banquet, Randy was living in a one-bedroom apartment over a bait shop outside Gulf Shores. Funny where pride ends up sometimes. I found that out from Jenna, though she tried saying it gently, like if she softened the details enough, maybe the whole thing wouldn't feel so sad. "He says it's temporary," she told me while we unpacked dishes in her new rental kitchen. The place was small but clean. 2 bedrooms, faded linoleum floors, window unit air conditioner that rattled every time it kicked on. Still better than the old house had felt near the end. You could breathe here. That mattered. The boys were outside trying to figure out how to put air in their bike tires, while I wrestled with a crooked cabinet door using a screwdriver older than both of them. "You got it backward," I called through the screen door. The older boy sighed dramatically. "We know." "You definitely do not." That got the first real laugh I'd heard from either of them in weeks. Jenna leaned against the counter watching us quietly. She looked thinner now, exhausted still, but lighter somehow too. Like somebody finally stopped pressing on her chest. Randy had not handled consequences well. Turns out donors get angry when they discover their patriotic charity event was built on lies and borrowed military credibility. One local reporter picked up the story after videos from the banquet started circulating online. Then came questions about the business applications, then lawyers, then investigations. Not prison-level disaster, nothing dramatic like television. Real life usually punishes slower than that. But the construction contracts dried up fast. People stopped answering his calls. A few veterans groups publicly distanced themselves. And in towns along the Gulf Coast, reputation travels faster than hurricanes. Especially bad reputation. The strangest part, I didn't feel victorious. I mostly felt tired. There were mornings I woke up reaching for my phone because I thought maybe Jenna needed help again. Other mornings I'd sit on my porch with coffee going cold in my hand, replaying that night at the Holiday Inn over and over. Not the exposure itself, the boys' faces. That was the piece that stayed with me. Children should never have to watch one parent destroy another, no matter who deserves it. A week after the banquet, I got a text from Randy around midnight. Just 3 words. "You happy now?" I stared at the screen a long time before deleting it unanswered. Because the truthful answer was complicated. Number, but also yes. And maybe that's what justice feels like once you get old enough. Not triumph. Relief mixed with grief. Jenna eventually filed for separation. Not because of the banquet, she told me one evening while we stocked groceries into her refrigerator. "Honestly," she said quietly, "I think it ended a long time before that." She held a carton of eggs against her chest and looked down at the kitchen floor. I just kept trying to remember the version of him from 15 years ago. That sentence hit me hard. Because I understood it perfectly. Sometimes loyalty becomes archaeology. You keep digging through damage, looking for the person you used to love. Outside, one of the boys yelled because the other one had dropped a wrench into the grass. Life moving forward anyway. That became the rhythm of those months. Small things. Helping with homework. Fixing bicycles. Teaching the younger boy how to patch a fishing net after he tore one at the pier. Quiet work. Real work, not speeches. Not banners. One Saturday morning, Earl drove down to Pensacola and dragged me onto his fishing boat before sunrise. "You need daylight and bad coffee," he announced. I already have bad coffee at home. Not veteran-grade bad. Fair point. The Gulf was calm that morning. Flat gray-blue water stretching forever while pelicans hovered low over the surface hunting breakfast. Neither of us talked much at first. Older veterans do that sometimes. Sit together quietly like conversation is optional equipment. Around mid-morning, Earl reeled in a red snapper and glanced sideways at me. "You still carrying it?" "Kandahar." "Mm-hmm." I looked out toward the horizon. The truth was yes. Of course yes. You don't watch people die at 29 and wake up magically healed at 42. That's Hollywood nonsense. But something had shifted. For years I'd treated survival like unpaid debt. Like staying alive meant I owed the world constant silence and usefulness forever. The banquet changed that. Not because exposing Randy made me powerful. Because it forced me to stop apologizing for existing. "I don't know," I admitted finally. Earl nodded slowly like that was enough honesty for one day. A few weeks later, the Navy held a small recognition ceremony tied to the documentary release. Nothing huge. No television cameras, mostly older pilots, retired enlisted men surviving families. The kind of gathering where everybody's knees hurt and half the room takes blood pressure medication. I almost didn't go. Then Earl called me a coward, which irritated me enough to attend out of spite. The ceremony took place in a modest hall near Pensacola Naval Air Station. Coffee in styrofoam cups, folding tables, old mission photos projected quietly against one wall. I recognized faces I hadn't seen in years, some heavier, some slower, one missing an arm, another using oxygen. Time catches warriors eventually. Doesn't matter how tough they used to be. A retired commander shook my hand afterward and said, "Hell of a thing you did over there." I thanked him politely. But the moment that stayed with me happened later in the parking lot. Earl stood beside my truck while evening wind rolled in from the bay. "You know," he said, "surviving isn't something you apologize for." Simple sentence, still hit harder than most speeches I've heard. That night I sat on my porch long after dark. The old flight jacket rested over the chair beside me. Tree frogs chirped near the water. Warm Gulf wind moved through the pines. Somewhere down the shoreline, somebody played soft country music low enough that it blended into the night. My hip ached. Storm coming tomorrow, probably. I sipped cold coffee and thought about all the years I spent shrinking myself to make other people comfortable. Family, co-workers, men like Randy, even strangers, especially after the military. Because people get uneasy around women who survived hard things without becoming soft again. But here's what I finally learned. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Sometimes quiet is just exhaustion. And sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is stop letting disrespect pass as peace.